Have you ever operated a sweeper or a scrubber? You know, one of those big machines with the big round sweeper brushes on it. There is usually a little round one sticking out on the right-hand side. On a combination unit, it'll have a long squeegee bowed around the back of it also. Hello all, I'm Marty with Warehouse and Operations as a Career, and that is just one of the subjects that has amazed me this week. So, I'm going to try and shorten a long story here. I have a lot of things I wanted to talk about today, but, well, this one came up and I thought it was worth noting. It all started when I received a phone call regarding a question about PIT. The question was, did a person have to be certified and go through a PIT class to operate a sweeper scrubber unit? Now, oh my gosh, when I answered no, not actually, but they did have to be trained and observed on it? Well, before I could even finish my thought, the young lady started going into a long, and might I say very loud, conversation or situation that she had had with her boss, supervisor, or somebody that had told her she could not operate it because she was not certified to drive it. Okay, it took me a minute to get her calmed down. Once I had accomplished that, I wanted to clarify my answer to her. I told her that although the sweeper or scrubber did not necessarily fall under OSHA's 29 CFR 1910.178 standard, as with any type of equipment or machine, a person should not, and I'll go ahead and say cannot, operate anything in the workplace unless they have been trained and instructed to do so. Period. That kind of makes me think of a real quick story. All of our warehouse tools are dangerous, of course, if they're not properly used. I'm preparing a class now on how to properly use a hand truck or a two-wheel dolly for the driver-helper position. As I was gathering a few testimonials from the pros, things like how did you learn and what do you wish someone had told you before you took the job? One of the funniest stories was a gentleman said that when he took the job, he figured using a hand truck was simple. You basically just stack product on it, tilt it back, and push it forward. He had moved his own refrigerator with a moving dolly once, thought it was pretty simple. He shared that on his first week, he was just stacking his driver's dollies for him and doing it as the driver had instructed him to do. He felt like that he'd learned quite a bit and wanted to help his driver by stacking and running a load down the ramp and into the customer's doorway for him. Well, things did not go quite as he had planned. He stated his stacking was great. He broke the load over. It was much heavier than he had imagined it would be. Anyway, he pushed it forward. As he was about to enter the ramp, he thought about how careful he needed to be as there was only about 1.5 inches to play with on either side of his dolly wheels and the upraised sides of the ramp. Well, about a quarter of the way down the ramp, sure enough, his right wheel touched the side. Of course, it locked up or stopped, causing his estimated 250-pound load to pull him forward and to the right, forcing all of the freight and himself to fall from the side, about 6 foot to the ground. Now, he was extremely fortunate, and he didn't get hurt, and not too much of the product was damaged, but his driver was not impressed by his motivation and enthusiasm. His driver expressed how dangerous a hand truck can be. It looks simple, but he could have broken his femur bone with that fall. The driver explained that he had seen 2 people do the same thing with a much worse outcome. Well, I kind of jumped off subject there, but I wanted to show how even the simplest piece of equipment can hurt us. Where was I? Oh yeah. So this young lady's supervisor had told her that she could not operate their sweeper scrubber unit because she was not certified to drive it. Her point was that she did not need to be certified to drive it. Once again, that certify word I think is being misused. I cannot stress enough the importance of training. I walked her through it, explained the high points to her, and she went back to her boss and they worked it out. She has since been trained and is now an operator. She did state after her training that she had no idea how much responsibility the position had and how much damage or, an inexperienced operator could do, or the cost of damaging the brushes or squeegee unit. Next up, I wanted to talk about eye wash stations. I think everyone would agree our eyes are important to us. Hence why all facilities are required to provide their employees with an eye wash station. Now, these can be piped-in units, where we push a lever and water is shot up into our eyes from city plumbing, or even gravity-fed units where we pull down a base with 2 eyelet dispensers that are being gravity-fed a solution of water from an onboard reservoir, or even a few bottles with squirt tops that can be used to flush out our eyes within the event of an emergency. And these bottles are what brought up today's topic. Yes, it's important and required that we have an eye wash station identified at our facility, but we are also required to keep them sanitary and available for use. This week I heard about an orientation tour being given to a new member of management. The supervisor was really proud of his crew and their facility, and they always do a great job. The tour was going great until they reached the eye wash station. There were 3 bottles, which was fine as the station was built as a 3-bottle station, but the dust and dirt that were on the bottles, from what I heard, they could not have been used without running water over them to clean them up a little bit. Now, of course, they were immediately cleaned up and placed back in their rack, but ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure someone had walked by them before and seen that they needed attention, right? Could we associate a failure with training here as well? Had the frontline crew not been trained regarding the eye wash stations? Now let's talk about a small pet peeve of mine. I was talking with an associate about how a picture is worth 1,000 words when it comes to an audit at our facilities. I visited a warehouse and every piece of equipment had paint knocked off of it. The equipment was a bit aged, but had been well maintained. The bollard posts throughout the building needed painting and had been nicked up pretty bad. Now, this was an older facility, really well ran, and I knew their safety culture was very strong, especially where equipment and equipment usage were concerned. I noticed a new hire being shown around, and he was checking out that equipment. It just looked bad. The ops guy here, well, he just doesn't believe that time and the expense of paint is really needed. He doesn't see any benefit to it. I'd like to state and go on record as saying that he is wrong. They do work safe there, and they do provide a safe work environment for their employees, but the equipment in the building must be realized as an important part of that work environment, a motivator, if you will, a point of pride for the associates. Just as it's so much easier to work in a clean and organized work area, so is that feeling of pride in one's equipment and facility. I think I've mentioned before, I worked with a gentleman for about 17 years, the most professional forklift operator I've ever met. He purchased his own Raymond Corporation paint to touch up his lift every week. He took pride in it. And at that same facility, every once in a while, the frontline management team would take a Friday afternoon and go out in the warehouse and touch up all the corners, the bollard post, and rack ends. They all took pride in their facility. And that facility was the corporation's #1 operations and organization. Strayed a little bit, but that ops guy we were talking about, he is just wrong. Pride, in my opinion, is motivation. Could that be a training opportunity? If we look around us and we're honest with ourselves, I believe we can all recognize training opportunities daily. Not that a course needs to be developed for everything, but we should go ahead and step over to a teammate when we see them doing something that could be done safer or more efficiently and talk with them about it. Train them. Training doesn't have to be all formal. Sometimes helping is training, right? Well, I hope I've given you something to think about and maybe act on. We're all in this together and we're in it for the long haul, right? Until next week, ask a friend to subscribe to the podcast, visit our Facebook and Twitter feeds, and by all means, be safe in all that you do.